Is the 12th of April, 2022. And in today's edition of the Super Stream, we're going to be talking about the Masters from this past weekend and how it connects to a number of deaths that occurred in the NFL over the weekend. So again, my name is Derek, author, webmaster of Gematrinator.com. This year's Masters was won by Scottie Scheffler, a 25-year-old who became the 7th youngest Masters champion in history. Remarkably, Scottie Scheffler went to the same high school as Matthew Stafford, who of course won the Super Bowl back in February. And as this video goes on, we'll talk about how that's connected. Halfway through the tournament, NFL quarterback Dwayne Haskins mysteriously died while walking across the freeway before 7 in the morning. And it was a news story that really reminded me how careful I need to be when I take my morning walks on the interstate. Pretty dangerous out there. But this was in connection to two other deaths, and both of these men were connected to the Dallas Cowboys. On April 7th, the first day of the Masters, we had the death of Rayfield Wright, a former Dallas Cowboy who was born in the state of Georgia, which is where the Masters are held. On the last day of the Masters, a man named Gary Brown, a former running back in the NFL, who was a running backs coach for the Dallas Cowboys for 7 seasons, passed away. And this all connects to Scottie Scheffler, who lives in the city of Dallas, Texas, where Matthew Stafford is from. Stafford, born in Tampa, but raised in Dallas, where he went to Highland Park High School, the same school as Scottie Scheffler. But we're also going to talk about a significant riddle with other quarterbacks, particularly Ben Roethlisberger, the man who just retired from the Pittsburgh Steelers, the team that quarterback Dwayne Haskins was playing for when he died. Also, we had news from Brett Favre over the weekend regarding a major welfare scandal in the state of Mississippi. We'll talk about how he's connected. And all of this ties back to the Nazi Party. And that might be a little confusing at first. If you're new to this channel, that might sound a little far out. But that's healthy. Understand that by the end of this video, you will totally understand. And a shout out to one of my viewers who led me onto this clue. I Can See Your Red Thread on Instagram. His page is linked down in the description below, where there's a number of links related to this video. And I was skeptical at first, as I always treat everything, but after a little investigation, I figured out, yes, absolutely. This man, Scottie Scheffler, whose last name is decisively German, in a riddle connected to Ben Roethlisberger, whose name is extremely German. This all connects back to a riddle with the Nazi Party. And the main reason this has been is because there's been a new Auschwitz in the news lately, talking about how in Ukraine, Russian soldiers have been operating a crematoria, reminding us of the Holocaust, which was, of course, run by the Nazis. So let's get started with the numerology and synchronicity of all of these events. Of course, as always, we use the standard alphabetic order and its associated reduction method as the two primary Gematria ciphers, turning numbers and letters into turning words and phrases into numbers. Of course, we have the complementary reverse methods. Also, remember the two extended methods. Of course, the 26-letter alphabetic order on the right, and what I consider to be the more significant Latin or Jewish method on the left, which is based on the original Latin alphabetic order. So this weekend's big story going into the Masters was the return of Tiger Woods. And Tiger Woods has had a lot of controversy in his career, but he seems to have a knack for making big returns at the Masters. Now here we are in 2022, which in the Chinese zodiac is the year of the tiger, appropriate for a return for Mr. Woods. Specifically, 2022 is the year of the water tiger. Now, last year in February, Tiger Woods had a serious car accident which kept him out of action until this past weekend. This car accident occurred while he was on his way to the Riviera Country Club. Riviera, Spanish for river. Rivers, of course, containing a lot of water, like how this is the year of the water tiger. At the Riviera, Tiger Woods was scheduled to instruct 2 NFL quarterbacks. Both men played for the San Diego Chargers, Drew Brees and Justin Herbert. Now, Drew Brees was replaced in San Diego by a man named Philip Rivers, another reference to the water tiger year. Rivers was then replaced in San Diego by Justin Herbert. So these 2 men that Tiger was on his way to instruct bookended the career of Philip Rivers, for the water reference. This isn't the first time that Tiger has made a serious comeback at the Masters. Back in 2010, which was the last time we had a year of the Tiger, Woods made his return at the Masters in April of 2010. Now, 2010 was the year of the metal tiger, as each year on the Chinese zodiac is associated with an element. Tiger Woods' car accident that led to his absence prior to the Masters that year occurred right outside his home, where he hit a metal fire hydrant with his SUV. So now Tiger's making his return, and he was all the talk of the Masters going in. Full capacity crowd, high ticket prices, big ratings for golf. The tournament began on the date April 7th. And on April 7th, we had the death of a man who used to play in the NFL named Rayfield Wright. Now, a tiger is a pretty big cat, and Rayfield Wright's nickname was Big Cat. Again, this man played for the Dallas Cowboys, Dallas the hometown of the tournament's winner. Halfway through the Masters tournament, an active NFL quarterback died. Dwayne Haskins, hit by a dump truck, in a story I mentioned as being pretty bizarre earlier. Haskins' nickname was Simba, which was taken from the Disney film The Lion King. And of course, the lion is another pretty big cat. In the description under this video below, you'll see a link to my video on Dwayne Haskins. One thing I didn't mention in that video is how Dwayne Haskins' death was connected to the retirement of Ben Roethlisberger. Notice how the name Dwayne Haskins has double gematria of 72 in the reduction methods. And his death fell 72 days after Ben Roethlisberger announced his retirement, both men playing for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Notice how the word quarterback also equals 72. And we'll see this number over and over as we go. Consider how 72 is par for a round of golf at Augusta National. Matt Stafford, who went to the same high school as Scotty Scheffler, was born on the date 7/2, the 7th of February. Now, if you include the end date, Haskins died 73 days after Roethlisberger's retirement. And notice how Haskins wore numbers 7 and 3 during his time in the NFL. Ben Roethlisberger even wore number 7. 73 is a number of sacrifice in the alphabetic order. Sacrifice sums to 73. Notice how the phrase ritual sacrifice also sums to 73. This man dying 730 days before the next solar eclipse, which equals 73, to pass over the United States. Or the next total eclipse, to be more specific. So back to Tiger Woods. Now, again, the man who died on April 7th was named Big Cat Rayfield Wright. He came from the Dallas Cowboys for most of his career. Well, on the last day of the Masters, another man connected to the Dallas Cowboys died. Former running back and current running backs coach Gary Brown passed away after a bout with cancer at the young age of 52. Remarkably, on the same day we got this news story, NFL legend Brett Favre was in the news for a welfare scandal that he was involved in his home state of Mississippi. And consider how Brett Favre's last coach for the Green Bay Packers was Mike McCarthy, who is now the current head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, also known as America's team in the National Football League. Now, Mike McCarthy is strongly connected to the death of Gary Brown, and let's take a look at this. Now, Gary Brown used to be the coach for the Dallas Cowboys, but he actually died while he was coaching for the Wisconsin Badgers. And this is interesting because Mike McCarthy used to coach the Green Bay Packers and Brett Favre, who play in the state of Wisconsin. Notice how Dallas, Texas has matching 118 Gematria with the state of Wisconsin. This is a number connected to death and homicide, both summing to 118 in Latin Gematria. Gary Brown died a span of exactly 118 weeks after Mike McCarthy was hired as the head coach of the Cowboys. Now remember, the big number of death is 38. In the alphabetic order, death equals 38. The word killing is 38, so is murder. And the Dallas area just hosted WrestleMania 38 a week before the Masters. And in reduction, the Masters equals 38. This man, Gary Brown, was born on the date July 1st, which can be written 701. And on the date he died, Mike McCarthy was exactly 701 months old. This is a number connected to this quarterback, Ben Roethlisberger, whose name in English Gematria sums to 701. Notice how the number 71 is connected to both Augusta, Georgia, the site of the Masters, as well as Dallas, Texas, 71. And if you watched the golf tournament, on the final day, Scotty Scheffler hilariously four-putt the last hole, meaning he finished with a 71. Probably no accident at all. So, as I mentioned, Gary Brown died while he was a coach for the Wisconsin Badgers. And his death at the age of 52 connects us to Favre. Favre is currently 52 years old also, and the name Favre equals 52. But the other strong connection to the state of Wisconsin is that Gary Brown's middle name was Leroy, or Leroy. Later this year, former Packers Hall of Famer and legend Leroy Butler, who was essentially the quarterback of the defense for the Packers when Brett Favre won the Super Bowl, Butler will be inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame later this year. And this is pretty significant because on my channel recently, I've been talking a lot about Hall of Fame riddles in connection to the deaths of major celebrities. This started with the death of Scott Hall, and his death was connected to his induction into the WWE Hall of Fame. In fact, last year he was inducted for a second time with the New World Order. This riddle extended when Foo Fighters drummer Taylor Hawkins died less than 2 weeks later. And Taylor Hawkins was just inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame last year. Hawkins was born in Fort Worth, Texas, which is part of the Dallas, Arlington, Fort Worth Metroplex. And again, the Dallas-Fort Worth area hosted WrestleMania last week. WrestleMania used the Cowboys star as their logo, as it was held in AT&T Stadium where the Cowboys play. Mike McCarthy, the current coach of the Cowboys, won one Super Bowl during his time with the Packers, and that game was played at AT&T Stadium in Dallas. But the fact that Taylor Hawkins was born in Dallas is again connected to Scotty Scheffler. As we mentioned earlier at the beginning of this video, Scheffler was raised in Dallas, went to the same high school as Matt Stafford. And if you'll see the links in the description below, there's a bigger riddle with Highland Park High School that connects Matt Stafford to Bobby Lane. And remember, Matt Stafford used to play for the Lions, the lions being another big cat, reminding us of how Simba from the NFL died. And this here just points out how Highland Park High School is in Dallas. So let's look at how this connects on a broader scale to major news events going on right now. The biggest thing going on in geopolitics is the war in Ukraine. Now, last week, we were told that the Russians were operating a crematoria in Mariupol, calling this the new Auschwitz. And, of course, Auschwitz was operated by the Nazi Party. And notice how in English Extended, Auschwitz has the same 1921 Gematria as Nazi Party. This 1921 is very close to the year that the Nazi Party was founded, which was 1920. We'll look more at that in a second. The Nazi Party was headquartered in what was called the Brown House. See this here? The Brown House, headquarters of the Nazi Party. This connects to the death of running backs coach Gary Brown. As we see here, Gary Brown dying at age 52. As far as the Nazis being founded in 1920, the German name was Stoffel, which sums to 192 with capital letters. But what's more important here is the original founding date, February 24th, of the Nazis. February 24th is the same day that Russia invaded Ukraine earlier this year. The date written 224. That invasion occurred exactly 1,224 months after the founding of the Nazi Party. In the alphabetic order, the Nazis equals 102. And, my bad there, this invasion occurred exactly 102 years to the day after the founding of the Nazi Party. Earlier I talked a lot about the connections between Brett Favre and this man Gary Brown. Notice how these two guys were born a span of 102 days apart. Part of this big Nazi code that we're seeing here. Now, the Nazis ended operations on the date October 10th. And October 10th is intriguingly the birthday of Brett Favre. And in my post, I point out how the Nazis reformed the welfare system in Germany. And here Brett Favre is getting into trouble for a welfare scandal. Notice how Favre's birthday was exactly 288 months after the end of the Nazi Party. And this is a significant number because think about 4 rounds at Augusta. The par is 288 for all 4 rounds. And 4 rounds at the Masters, this is something that connects to Brett Favre even further. Of course, Brett Favre wore the number 4 for his entire career. And think about 4. This is what golfers yell when they hit a bad shot. They yell 4. And in the alphabetic order, the word golf has numerology of 4, summing to 40 in the alphabetic order. On the same day that the Masters ended, Ben Roethlisberger was a span of 40 years and 40 days old. Favre's former coach, Mike McCarthy, even has a life lesson number of 40. Favre's October 10th birthday leaves 82 days on the year, and this is a number that's significant to Augusta, Georgia, which has Gematria of 82, and also sits on the 82nd meridian west. The name Roethlisberger also has Gematria of 82, and Big Ben was born in the year 82. Notice how the Nazi Party was dissolved in the year 45. This is another number that's significant to Brett Favre, who has a life lesson number of 45. The name Brett Favre equals 45 in reduction. The Masters ended 45 days after the anniversary of the Nazi Party, which was celebrated by the Russians invading Ukraine. Green Jacket and Augusta both have gematria of 45. But consider how the new Auschwitz is operating in the city of Mariupol. Mariupol has Jewish or Latin gematria of 450. The Super Bowl that Mike McCarthy won with the Green Bay Packers in Dallas, Texas, was Super Bowl 45. That Super Bowl was the Green Bay Packers' 13th championship in the history of the franchise. And notice how the number 13 sums to 45 in both reduction methods. And Mike McCarthy, there might be no one in the world more coded with the number 13 than this guy. His initials MM. The 13th letter. His birth numerology is 103. And he was even born a span of 13 days before the JFK assassination, which was in Dallas. The 45th prime number is 197. This is found in the gematria of Green Jacket and Augusta with capital letters taken into account. But this number also reflects the birthday of Leroy Butler, the Green Bay Packer who was the quarterback of the defense for Favre's Super Bowl winning team in the 90s. That date can also be written 19/7. From the date that the Nazis ended operations in 1945 to the date of the Masters ending this year was exactly 918 months. In reverse Sumerian, which is the alphabetic order times 6, the name Brett Favre equals 918. The name Leroy Butler also equals 918 in regular Sumerian. Butler is from Jacksonville, Florida, which has English gematria of 918. Notice how swastika and the swastika has very, very similar digits. That, of course, is the symbol of the Nazi Party. In that same Sumerian cipher, Mariupol sums to 630, and on the date the Masters ended, Brett Favre was exactly 630 months old. 63, the number in reverse reduction that connects Brett Favre to Leroy Butler. One more look at the date October 10th on the calendar. October 10th is the 283rd day on the Gregorian calendar. When Gary Brown died, Leroy Butler was 2,803 weeks old. Gary Brown was also 283 days after his birthday. This brings us to the next major part of this whole riddle, as notice how the number 666 has gematria of 283. 666 is revealed as the number of the beast in the book of Revelation, which sums to 1010. 1010 like October 10th, the date that we've repeatedly talked about throughout this decode. Now that cuts it for the slides, but I want to explain more about this 666 riddle. Notice how Leroy Butler is a third, and as I commonly talk about on this channel, anyone with the I after their name is connected to a 666 riddle. And this is very simple because I is the 9th letter, and 9 is an upside-down 6. In English gematria, the name Brett Favre even has this 999 gematria. Favre was born in the year 1969, which is pretty similar. But how wild is this? If you measure from the end of the Nazi Party, which was on October 10th of 1945, to the birthday of Mike McCarthy, we get exactly a span of 6,606 days. On top of that, from that same dissolution date to the birthday of Gary Brown is 8,666 days. If you write out the number 666 as we did earlier, remember this sums to 283 in the Jewish method, notice how the alphabetic order yields 294. This is the same as 603 score and 6, as the book of Revelation tells us. Now, this 294 is significant because Mike McCarthy was born 294 weeks before Gary Brown. And when Brown died, he was the coach of the Cowboys for exactly 2 years and 94 days. 666 is called the number of the beast in the book of Revelation, and the word beast has gematria of 198. This is pretty important because the name Leroy Butler III equals 198. And Gary Brown, who has Leroy as his middle name, his name also sums to 198. This all ties back to Leroy Butler's hometown of Jacksonville, Florida, which equals 198. Just to show you how important this Latin cipher is once again, notice how the first statistic listed for Leroy Butler is that he had 989 career tackles, while the name Leroy Butler III sums to 989. I want to share with you next the largest prime number connection I think I've ever made on this channel or this blog. Now, on the date that Gary Brown died, when Scheffler won the Masters, Mike McCarthy was exactly 3,048 weeks old. Again, this was on April 10th. 3,048 weeks. Well, let's look at the 3,048th prime number, which before this decode is not something I've ever done. But the 3,048th prime number is 27,941. Well, if you measure back from the death of Gary Brown to the founding of the Nazi Party, actually, I'm sorry, the dissolution of the Nazi Party, October 10th of 45, well, look how many days you get, 27,941. On top of that, Gary Brown was also born a span of 348 days after Leroy Butler's birthday, the guy who he shares a name with. And the number 348 found in the gematria of both star and Nazi. And consider how the symbol of the Cowboys is the star, right? But there's something else that's strong here. Notice how star equals 58 and 50. The word Nazi also equals 58 and 50. And on the date that Gary Brown died, Mike McCarthy was exactly 58 years and 5 months old. 11/10/63. 58 years, 5 months exactly. There's some more interesting things like how the Nazi Party's paramilitary group was called the Stoffel, better known as the SS. SS, like the initials of Scotty Scheffler, whose last name is again very German. Stoffel equals 1110 in gematria. 1110 is the birthday of Mike McCarthy. We talked about the rest of these connections earlier. But what I want to go back to is this connection between Scotty Scheffler and Matthew Stafford, both of whom went to the same high school. That high school was Highland Park High School. And notice how Highland Park High School has gematria of 213 and 132. Now, this year's Super Bowl, which was won by Matt Stafford, a Highland Park graduate, was held on the date February 13th, written 213 or 13/2. And on the exact same day that Matthew Stafford won the Super Bowl, Scotty Scheffler also got his very first PGA Tour victory, February 13th. Amazing, right? But to pile on here, if you measure from Super Bowl 56, which Stafford won, to the date that the Masters ended, it was 56 days. and the Masters equals 56, and it ended on a date with numerology of 56. Notice how the number 56 has matching gematria with Dallas, Texas, 118. In reduction, 56 also matches the last name, Stafford, and the last name, Scheffler. But as it turns out, Matthew Stafford has a myriad of connections to Augusta, Georgia, and the Masters tournament. Notice how the name Matthew Stafford sums to 179 in the standard alphabetic order. 179 like the reverse value of his hometown, Dallas, Texas. Both of these numbers are connected to Augusta, Georgia. Both Georgia and Augusta have gematria of 179, like the name Matthew. 179 is a significant prime number. That would be the 41st prime number. Look at how Masters equals 41 in reduction. This year's Masters ended on the date April 10th, like 410 or 41. And on the date the Masters started, Matt Stafford was exactly 410 months old. The high school Highland Park sums to 62, which is the same as Matthew Stafford in reduction. That also syncs up with Augusta, Georgia, 62. In fact, the state of Georgia equals 62. On the final day of the Masters, Matt Stafford was 62 days after his birthday. Meanwhile, Scottie Scheffler was 293 days after his birthday. And that's important because 293 is the 62nd prime number. Also, notice how the name Matthew Stafford sums to 226 in reverse. This is actually the same as John Matthew Stafford in ordinal, 226. That's his full name. The city of Augusta, Georgia, the home site of the Masters, sums to 226. Also an 82 that we see synced up. Also a 71, which was Scottie Scheffler's score on the final day of the Masters. The name Scheffler in Jewish gematria sums to 223. Also 82. Remember, Augusta, Georgia sits on the 82nd meridian and has gematria of 82. But the 223 is significant because Masters tournament equals 223. In that same reverse method, the Masters equals 142. And if you look at Scottie Scheffler's primary birth numerology, it sums to 142. So this guy was essentially born for a major Masters riddle. The name Scottie Scheffler even sums to 173 in the alphabetic order, and he was born on the 173rd day of a leap year. Well, 173 is the 40th prime number. And this guy plays the sport of golf. Remember, golf equals 40, representing the number 4, which some of these golfers were yelling this weekend. So really powerful stuff there, but what I want to talk about is how on March 1st, you know, there's this big riddle this year with WrestleMania, Dallas, the Masters, right? Well, all the way back on March 1st, I made this post explaining how Hulk Hogan is connected to the Masters. And this is actually a really simple riddle. Hulk Hogan was born in the city of Augusta, Georgia, which is the home of the Masters. And his birthday is the 223rd day of the year, which leaves 142 days on the calendar. We just looked at these numbers, right? Masters tournament, 223, the Masters, 142. And the guy who won the Masters the year that Hulk Hogan was born was Ben Hogan, the same year that Hogan's Secret was revealed. And then they named this guy, whose real name is Bolea, they change his name to Hogan once he gets to the WWF. Of course, no surprise there. And Hulk Hogan was part of the New World Order, the NWO. And of course, with this whole World War III thing going on in Ukraine, there's been a lot of talk from Joe Biden and others about how we need a new world order to keep peace on the planet. Now, the New World Order was founded by Hulk Hogan and Kevin Nash and Scott Hall. And we just talked about Scott Hall a little bit ago. This was the man who died in the lead up to WrestleMania. And the name Scott Hall equals 38. This year was WrestleMania 38. Notice how the name Scott Hall equals 29 in reduction. Scott Hall's character in the WWF was Razor Ramon. And notice how the name, I think it's Ramon, sums to 29. I don't think it's Razor doesn't 29, no. It's just Ramon 29. But this character, Razor Ramon, was inspired by the film Scarface. And Scarface also equals 29. And if you measure from the date that Scott Hall was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, it was 2,900 days. Scott Hall, Hall of Fame. And of course, the WWE Hall of Fame is 29 years old. This year was the 29th class. And look at who led this year's WWE Hall of Fame class. The Undertaker, the Dead Man, right? The big number of death. And for any wrestling fans out there, of course, The Undertaker, probably the most legendary of all WWF characters. And he gave a pretty good speech, I thought. Talked about his restored faith even, which was a bit of a surprise for someone who spent his career masquerading as The Undertaker. But yeah, this actually reminds me, there was another Hall of Fame riddle earlier in February. And I did a big video on this. It was all connected to the death of Jeremy Giambi. Now, Jeremy Giambi was listed in the Mitchell Report. And the Mitchell Report is what prevented a large number of Major League Baseball players from getting into the Hall of Fame. And this year, two of those players, Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens, missed out on their last year of Hall of Fame eligibility. And of course, Jeremy's brother, Jason, he was one of these steroid guys as well. And I'm sure Jeremy was involved too. But this is just, again, to highlight this constant Hall of Fame riddle that's been going on with all these deaths in the media lately. Now, before I end this stream, I want to talk about this organic synchronicity that I had with today's video. So, yesterday I was putting all of this work together, and I like to take my time now. I don't always make a video the same day. So I was putting the slides together, and then I scheduled the stream for today. And of course, today is a Tuesday. Here we are, April 12th. Now, I thought it would be funny to measure to my own birthday, because I was born on a Tuesday. And I wanted to see how many weeks old I was on this date. And I was like, oh my God, this is wild. This actually connects to a larger riddle here. So today I turned 1,923 weeks old. And this number 1923 is a number I kind of talk about somewhat regularly. Because in the year 1923, scientists began counting new moons. So if you go to time and date, for instance, and let me try this, time and date moon phases, you'll notice that every lunation has a number associated with it. And these began in the year 1923. So the Brown lunation number begins in the year 1923. And here I am making a video about the death of a guy named Brown in connection to the Brown House, which was the headquarters of the Nazi Party. And here I am, 1923 weeks old, which is the year that the brown lunation number started. But, you guys know I'm big into this organic matrix, right? I believe that we're all here for a reason, and the fact that you're watching this video is actually a coded experience. So I was born in the year 1985 on June 4th, and that means I was born during lunation number 772. And in the language of Gematria, this English extended cipher, the one that's closest to ancient Hebrew and Greek isopsephy, my name sums to 772. And this is all pretty remarkable considering how much of my research when I first started this all had to do with the moon and the total solar eclipse code, which I am clearly very fond of. So even I'm connected to this story a little bit. And this is why when you watch my videos, I don't scream about the cabal, I don't holler about the Illuminati, I don't cuss at the elite. Well, sometimes I do, and rightfully so. But when you study numerology and look at these things, you start to discover that there's something much deeper going on. And the fact that I'm connected to all of this, it blows my mind all the time. And if I'm also connected to this, what else is really happening? And are these athletes, are these celebrities, are they immune to synchronicity just because they're in the celebrity spotlight? Or is the same code that runs our lives also running their lives? So honestly, I have no idea how much of this was some kind of Illuminati ritual or some type of sacrifice. Especially when you talk about guys, in their mid to late 70s. Obviously, the story with Dwayne Haskins is really bizarre, and there's obviously something going on there. But I strongly believe that, let's say someone's scheduling a ritual, and they're doing something by the numbers. I believe that this matrix, this world that we live in, is a self-reflecting one. So earlier in March, on March 1st, this was the incorporation date for Gematrinator 85. And I think I talked about this a little bit in a previous stream, but I want to talk more about it. Now, the reason I went with Gematrinator 85 is because, well, first of all, I was born in the year 85, but my business partner was also born 85 days after me. And the day that we incorporated the business, March 1st, we had news that Derek Jeter was stepping down as Marlin's CEO after 5 years. And I've been making Gematria videos for 5 years, and my name is Derek. And this is the most famous person in the world named Derek. So I start a business by the numbers connected to the Mercury code. There's very little that I intended to do. It did have to do with Mercury and my connections to Mercury. But it was very little. And now this world, the Matrix, fed this back to me, right? I'm going into business. A guy named Derek. This guy named Derek leaving his business venture after 5 years. This is the truth about reality. And this is what the occult and I think a lot of people on YouTube don't want you to know about, is that if you actually put action into your thoughts, you will see that the world kind of forms around you, in a sense. Now, there were far more synchronicities I had on this date, March 1st. I feel like it's more than anyone that's watching this video can really understand, but I have no doubt anymore that, we're living in something akin to a computer. I don't like calling it a simulation because our minds don't have the capability to comprehend what's being simulated, in my view. But back to this organic code as far as this video here that you're watching right now. There's something more connected to the moon here. So let's fast forward this calendar to 2022. And notice how the current lunation number is 1228. So if you saw my video on Taylor Hawkins, which is also linked below in the description, I talked about how this lunation is very significant. And what I failed to mention is how this is all connected to John Madden. Ah, darn it. John Madden. Let's pull him up real quick. Brett Favre was John Madden's favorite player, right? And John Madden's birthday was on April 10th, which was the last day of the Masters. And this guy was associated with the NFL 100%. Now, on the end date of the Masters, John Madden turned 86 years old. And this is important because this year's Masters was the 86th Masters. Look at the word Nazi, something to 860, connected to John Madden's age. Also, Nazi equaling 22, like how this is the year 22. This is also the reduction value of golf, 22. And John Madden's death was completely connected to the planet Mercury. Notice how Mercury equals 1228 in English Gematria, reminding us of how we're currently in lunation number 1228. Well, John Madden died on 1228, and his death fell exactly 103 days before his 86th birthday. 103. And look at Mercury. 103, 86. Mercury also equals 41. And lunation 1228 began on April 1st, written 4/1. And then the Masters ended on the other date, written 41, 4/10. But as it turns out, I'm pretty connected to the planet Mercury too. Now, my birthday is June 4th, which means my birth sign is Gemini. And the ruling planet of Gemini is Mercury. Now, my business partner, he's a Virgo, and Mercury also rules that sign. Every planet has a magic square associated with it. And here we're looking at the magic square of Mercury. Now, there's 64 total squares in this square. And my birthday is June 4th, which is written 6/4. But how about this? In the square number cipher, which is the alphabetic order, and simply using square numbers, Mercury equals 1917. And when I started the business, I was exactly 1917 weeks old. See this? Now, that was on purpose, right? And the date was the 1st of March, 1-3, like Mercury, 103. But check out how my name in this square number cipher equals 2080. And if you look at the magic square of Mercury, it has a total sum of 2080, which matches my name in the square number cipher. Now, this is all pretty wild. And it's also on top of the fact that my name, Derek Takori, sums to 142 and 182. And here I'm teaching Gematria. You know, I made the Gematria calculator. I'm teaching the code and how it connects to synchronicity. And synchronicity is 182, just like my name. Now, I wasn't sure exactly where this video was going when I started it, but this takes me into a post that I made back on April 7th. And this post, first of all, I made a post on Carl Jung. And this man was a psychologist who worked with Sigmund Freud and wound up having a big falling out with Sigmund Freud because they disagreed about many of the core elements of psychology. Now, Carl Jung is a guy that is a little more along my line of thinking. This guy realized that Freud was full of a lot of crap. Sigmund Freud had this belief that all of our actions were based on repressed sexual desires, which, in my viewpoint, has always been ridiculous. If you think I'm teaching Gematria because this is going to get me laid, I mean, that's kind of a joke, right? Like, this is probably the last thing I would talk about, depending on the person. So Carl Jung said, hey, no, the unconscious is much greater than just repressed sexual desire. The unconscious is actually connected to what I tend to call the human hive mind, which is a collection of all human thoughts, memories, and experiences. And Carl Jung says he knew this existed because of something called synchronicity. He said synchronicity proves the existence of this field of consciousness that's invisible, but something that every human being can tap into. And I figured, okay, so Carl Jung, he's the guy who brought the idea of synchronicity into the greater consciousness. And when we talk about synchronicity, it's important to talk about this album by The Police. This is actually, one of the more critically received albums of all time, especially by The Police. Now, on the cover of this album, Sting is reading the book called Synchronicity by Carl Jung. And there's a major riddle here. Notice how Synchronicity began recording in the year 1982. And in English Gematria, synchronicity equals 1982. So no doubt this is very intentional. But followers of my work may also be familiar with another numerology channel. I often refer to Dan Barrett's YouTube. And when I first discovered Gematria, there were essentially two channels that I was watching. Of course, Zachary K. Hubbard, who's still going strong. And then there was this other one, Dan Barrett. And I was always fascinated by Dan's videos when I found them because he was talking about a different perspective, how things in the media, things that were playing out on a grand scale, were also playing out on a microscopic scale in his life. And so, as far as my perspective was, this was the teacher of synchronicity through Gematria. And I came to discover later that Dan Barrett was born in the year 1982, just about 1 month before the recording of the album Synchronicity began. The name Carl Gustav Jung, the psychologist who brought synchronicity into the public view, his name sums to 176, and that's the exact same ordinal value as Dan Barrett's full name, 176. The album Synchronicity was released on the date 17/6, like the 17th of June. But this goes deeper. Dan Barrett's common name also has matching gematria with Carl Jung's full name, 50 and 202. Carl Jung even died 50 days before his birthday, which is the number that these two share. This means Jung died 10 months and 11 days after his birthday, and the 10th of November is the birthday of Dan Barrett. And look at their nicknames even matching. C.G. Jung, the name that appeared on this cover of Synchronicity, that equals 100. And Daniel Edward equals 100, his nickname Dan Beartrap 100. And the cover of this book, Synchronicity, C.G. Jung equals 100. So, what's really going on here? I mean, are we looking at something like reincarnation? Do we actually have the ability as humans to see something like this? It's so bizarre to me. But this only gets crazier, guys. Check this out. Dan Barrett was born 107 days after Carl Jung's 107th birthday. And 107 is the 28th prime number, which connects to C.G. Jung, or Jung. But more interesting is that Jung's last birthday fell on the 208th day of the year, and then he would later die on the date that leaves 208 days in the year. 208, like the gematria of synchronicity. Jung died 208 days after Dan Barrett's birthday. Dan Barrett also wrote a book on synchronicity, and it's called The Synchromystic, which sums to 208 in reverse. Now, notice how the release date of The Synchromystic was August 6th, right? The 6th day of the month. Well, Carl Jung died on the 6th day of the month. exactly 60 years and 2 months before Dan Barrett's book. 62, which is the value of C.G. Young, which is how this guy put his name on the cover of his book. C.G. Young, 62. So as I mentioned, he was born in 1982, which is connected to synchronicity. And, of course, the album from Sting. Notice how Sting equals 95 with capital letters, and this brings us to the next part of this bizarre riddle. The number 95 is strongly connected to Dan Barrett. His common name is 95 ordinal, and his full name is 95 in reduction. And this is curiously a number that I'm connected to. My full name equals 95. My birthday has numerology of 95. But if you go back the 95th prime number of years, so the 95th prime number is 499, the 95th prime. And if you think back in history, the number 95, this brings us to this guy, Martin Luther, who posted the 95 Theses back in the year 1517. And this was to go against the Catholic Church, to kind of counter what they were teaching. And if you measure from the birthday of Martin Luther to the birthday of Dan Barrett, you get exactly 499 years. This 499 was also found in the Gematria of Carl Jung's full name. Martin Luther posted the 95 Theses on the October 31st, which is Halloween. And Halloween equals 95 in the alphabetic order. Now, there's a little more here. Martin Luther died on February 18th, written 218. And Dan Barrett's book released on the 218th day of the year. These digits connected to synchronicity. And the name Martin Luther has matching gematria with synchronicity, which connects to Dan Barrett's blog's name, The Mindless Freaks, 773. And there's a few more connections here that are pretty strong, but just think about the philosophical connections here as well. So when I first found Dan Barrett's work, he was doing work in synchronicity, which countered a little bit of what Zach Hubbard was doing, where Zach was saying that everything's being controlled by the occult, everything's in a numeric ritual, everyone's getting murdered by the numbers, right? So Dan Barrett kind of spoke up and he's like, well, wait a minute, I think there's a little more going on here. And that exact same spirit was found in Carl Jung, who worked with Sigmund Freud for so long until they had a falling out, where Carl Jung said, hey, I think there's a little bit more going on here. And then Martin Luther going up against the Catholic Church, seeing all this stuff they were teaching regarding purgatory and sacraments and sufferings. And Martin Luther stepped in and said, hey, wait a minute. I think you guys are taking this a little too far. So I don't have the answers, everyone. But I do think I'm one of the first people, at least in the public eye, along with Dan and these other researchers, who are really deeply exploring this synchronistic connections. Because if it's true that what Carl Jung says, that everything human beings have ever experienced and done and thought is out there in the ether, in the subconscious, then all of those thoughts and memories must have a way of manifesting once again. So when we see things like this, all these things connected in the Masters, I mean, if it was just the death of this one guy and it was really suspicious, then that's one thing, right? But all of these other connections, Rayfield Wright, Gary Brown, the Brown House, the Nazi Party, Leroy Butler, how is this that all of these things are connected? And I think I'm starting to come to terms with the fact that, through numerology, I think we are seeing repressed memories of the unconscious somehow manifest into the current day. That doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. It's a theory I'm working on. I'm still thinking about this. But, we wouldn't be doing this all justice if we didn't do the deep dive into these connections. And yeah, it's all pretty bizarre stuff. I mean, just my last name alone, Tikori. If you look up Tikori on Wikipedia, you'll probably come across this city called Tikorila from Finland. And look at what the word Tikori means in Finnish, an amount of 10. And here I am teaching base 10 numerology with a name that syncs up with Gematria, right? My name and birthday also has the 23. Don't forget the movie, the number 23, where Jim Carrey, who's 23 years older than I am, teaches Gematria. And Jim Carrey, born on January 17th, that's the date that we began counting the Brown lunation number, January 17th of 1923. And James Eugene Carey, he's also got the 95. Just like me and Dan Barrett. 95. And then, not to beat the dead horse here, but there was also the movie Pi, where the main character, played by Sean Gillette, builds a Gematria calculator essentially for the old Hebrew Torah and discovers the 216-letter name of God. And this guy has the same birthday as I do, June 4th. So, again, I don't know what's happening, but apparently I'm part of it, which makes this whole thing seem a little more harmless. And what I found was really interesting was that Carl Jung had a strong ideology that synchronicity could be used in therapeutic settings. And back in 2016, there was a survey of psychologists, and 2/3 of them said that they think synchronicity can help patients in therapy. Now, that was 6 years ago. I think humanity has come a long way in the last 6 years as far as understanding and exploring synchronicity. I bet that number is even higher. And ultimately, that's what I seek to do through Gematria, is help people understand that they do not live in a random, scary, terrifying universe. This world is beautiful, and the geometry that sits behind all of this is something more beautiful, more awesome, more incredible than anything I ever could have dreamed of discovering. I was a pretty miserable person in my late teens and 20s because I had no direction. I had no path. And I started to become convinced that there was no path. That's a scary place to be. This can help take people out of that. It's not going to work for everybody. A lot of people don't understand numbers. They don't like math. That's fine. But as time goes on, as humans get smarter, as we become more aware and pull ourselves out of this thought control matrix that the government and media wants us in, then the closer we can get to this real truth, which is that we are in God's matrix, so to speak. The Creator, whatever you want to call it, there's something phenomenal going on behind this, and it's possible that everyone on this planet is just another shade of yourself. So that's my take. Thanks for following along with my nutty beliefs. That's going to do it for today's super stream. I guess you could call it a little bit of a special edition here towards the end. Peace, love, God bless, and we'll talk to you all soon. See ya.